Hello, we're here at Innovista Law, the house of the TCPA Defense Force. My name is Ernesto Mendieta.
And I'm John Nelson.
And today we're going to talk about what does written consent mean under the TCPA. John, first, we know that under the TCPA you need to get consent. There's different levels of consent, and one is written consent. But what about text messaging? Give me a short answer first. Does written consent still apply to text messaging?
Sure. Written consent does apply to text messaging.
But how would that apply? Does written consent mean being physically in person signing a paper?
No, it does not. Thankfully, we have gotten into the digital age, and written consent does not actually mean consent on paper.
Okay, so what other ways do we have to get written consent?
Sure. So under the TCPA, you can get consent through writing, through a piece of paper if you want, but you can also get consent through ways that comply with what is called the e-Sign Act. And essentially what that is just another federal law recognizing that we're in a new age. We're in an age where you can consent via varying digital means. Essentially what this means is that you can obtain consent by someone engaging in a double opt-in process by texting in a keyword. You can also obtain consent by someone clicking a checkbox on a registration page or a web page in which they're clicking a box that says, I agree to receive these autodialed calls, or by simply clicking, a submit button or something of that nature.
Okay, I would like to get back to the e-Sign Act, but first, if you would have to break down the elements to give written consent, what would you say those elements are?
So it's very simple. It is a lot, but essentially what the TCPA requires is that you obtain that consent in writing, which again we know means more than just pen and paper. The agreement must be signed, again, in ways that are more than just on paper. That the person is providing the number to which they are giving the consent to be reached. That they are consenting to marketing messages, that they are consenting to marketing messages that may be auto-dialed, and that they are acknowledging consent is not a condition of purchase. All of that would be included in this written agreement that they are signing.
That would be the proper level of consent required.
Correct, for marketing messages.
Okay, so for marketing messages, correct. So if considering the e-Sign Act, we know that we have this law that adapted to the new technologies and the new ways of communicating with consumers. So the TCPA expressly accepts this way of giving consent or adopts what the e-Sign Act says.
Again, this was all carried out not just through the TCPA law Congress enacted, but through the varying FCC reports and orders and through court interpretations. But what we have gotten through the 26 years in which the TCPA has now been in existence is that you can obtain consent via ways that comply with the e-Sign Act, and it works for the TCPA. Okay. Complying with e-Sign Act equals complying with TCPA.
So for our viewers, just a reminder that written consent doesn't necessarily mean writing with a pen on a paper your name and signature. It could be different ways. It's different how you get consent for retailers. It's different how you do it for SMS platform providers. Written consent must be achieved, but it can be done in different ways. And it's also important because, as we have talked in other of our videos, it's a way of proving consent by your consumer in case you get sued.
Correct.
If you are forced into the court and you need to prove consent, there's a fight of if the consumer gave consent or not. The better records you have, the better chances you will have of proving that consent.
And the less you're spending on litigation.
Correct. So, okay, John, if we can conclude this video, what would you say is the conclusion of written consent applicable to text messaging?
Sure. So, prior express written consent does not necessarily mean written consent. Essentially what it means is complying with the e-Sign Act. Again, gaining that signature through the e-Sign Act may be a better form of obtaining that proof because it's something that can be easily recorded and kept in the event you are forced into litigation.
Great. Thank you, John. We're here at Innovista Law, the house of the TCPA Defense Force.